The year is 476 AD for 3 centuries. The Western Roman Empire has been crumbling, dissolving into chaos and disorder. From their capital in Constantinople, the emperors have been unable to exert any real authority over the unruly provinces of the West. And now the final blow is about to be struck. The last Western Roman emperor is just a child. His name is Romulus Augustulus. That is ironic because Romulus is the mythical founder of Rome, and Augustus was the first great emperor of the Roman Empire. Little Augustus will be the last. He sits in his luxurious palace in Ravenna, northern Italy, surrounded by all the toys a young boy could want. Fine clothes, gold coins, beautiful women. He spends his days enjoying the pleasures of life and passes the nights sleeping with a sword beside his bed, because even here in the heartland of Italy, no one is safe. Outside the city walls, the Visigoths, Vandals, and other barbarians are getting restless. Earlier today, one of Romulus's generals had to fight them off. The Visigothic king, Alaric, had assembled a large force and was demanding that the emperor hand over some gold. Instead, the general had bought off the Goths with 50 kilograms of gold. Now peace reigns once again, or so Romulus thinks. His guards come running, shouting that a new army is approaching. Horrible shouts can be heard from outside the walls, along with the clang of steel. Romulus looks out a window and sees thousands of angry faces. Some of the men carry shields emblazoned with a wolf's head. Others shout, "Death to Rome!" This is no ordinary band of looters. The army is well-disciplined, almost professional. As they get closer, Romulus can make out the man at the front. He is tall, muscular, and wears armor adorned with the heads of wolves. This must be their king. And who is he? Well, we know his name was Odoacer, a Germanic warrior, and later today he would become famous for ending the Western Roman Empire. In a few moments, Odoacer's men burst through the gates and run through the empty streets of Ravenna. The citizens hide in their homes. It doesn't take long for Odoacer's men to find Romulus Augustulus. He is brought before the conquering king, dressed in fine clothes, scared and alone. All around him, his treasures are being looted. Odoacer looks at the trembling boy and asks for the imperial regalia, the insignia of the Western Roman emperors. Romulus hands them over. Odoacer is pleased. He is victorious. And now he is the ruler of Italy. He sends the regalia to Constantinople, to the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno, and it is the last official act of the Western Roman Empire. The last emperor is deposed. Soon after, the imperial purple is worn by a Germanic king. The era of Roman emperors in the West is truly over. But how did it happen? Why did Rome fall? How did a great empire go from strength to weakness to complete oblivion? To answer that question, let us wind back the clock to a time when Rome still stood strong. Welcome to epic world history. In order to understand the fall of Rome, we have to go back to the middle of the 3rd century AD. During the reign of Septimius Severus, the Roman Empire is huge. It stretches from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia. Under the Severan dynasty, however, the empire is stretched too thin. The frontiers are becoming increasingly difficult to defend, and the emperors struggle to keep order in such a huge state. We should also mention that the 3rd century is a time of crisis throughout the whole of the ancient world. Greece is occupied by the Ottoman Turks. The Parthians are encroaching on the eastern provinces of Alexander the Great's former empire. Only Rome seems strong, but underneath the surface, things are far from good. In 235, after just 8 years in power, the Emperor Publius Helvius Pertinax is killed by his own Praetorian Guard, and the empire is thrown into chaos. Civil war breaks out. Governors and ambitious generals are seizing territory and declaring themselves emperor. 8 men hold the purple in the span of just 18 years. The crisis reaches its peak in 253, when the usurper Emperor Pescennius Niger is defeated by the Syrian Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The latter's son, Commodus, then takes the throne. He is the last emperor of the Nervontanine dynasty, and his mad and erratic behavior marks the end of the so-called Antonine Peace. Commodus is hated by the population. He mismanages the economy, wastes money, he fights gladiators in the Colosseum, and he enjoys the pleasures of the flesh while Rome burns. In the 3rd century, the Antonines managed to stabilize the empire, but they never really fixed its structural problems. This is why the crisis in the 3rd century is worse than ever before. When Commodus dies, there is no clear successor. Civil war breaks out yet again. Eventually, a man from Africa rises to power, Aurelian. He defeats his rivals and reunites the empire. In 275, he moves the capital from Milan to Rome, where it had been under the rule of Diocletian since 293, but although the unity of the empire is restored, it is only skin deep. Rome is exhausted and vulnerable, and in the following century, the empire falls apart. One of the big mistakes made by Aurelian is that he tried to reform the administration of the empire. He created new provinces, reorganized the army, and implemented new financial policies. Unfortunately, these changes were never fully adopted. After his assassination in 275, the old system was largely restored, which prevented Rome from solving its major issues. The empire becomes weaker and weaker and will never recover. In the late 3rd century, Rome is ruled by a series of capable emperors, but none of them can solve the empire's major problems. In 284, Diocletian divides the empire between himself and his co-emperor, Maximian. This division might have stabilized the empire in the short term, but in the long term, it proved to be fatal. As the empire grew weaker and weaker, the provincial rulers became more and more independent. They were simply too far away from the capital to be controlled. Diocletian resigns in 305, the Tetrarchy ends, and the empire is plunged into chaos once again. The situation is complicated by the appearance of a new religion, Christianity. Officially founded by Jesus Christ in the 1st century, it was persecuted by the Roman authorities. In the 4th century, it exploded in popularity and attracted millions of followers throughout the empire. But it was still outlawed. And in 311, when Emperor Licinius issued the Edict of Toleration, it gave Christians an extra reason to leave the cities. And without Christian farmers tending to their fields, the food supply collapsed. The result was widespread famine. It was during this period of turmoil that a new star appeared on the horizon. Constantine the Great defeated his rival Maxentius near Rome in 312 and entered the city. Here, he converted to Christianity and established New Rome in Byzantium, which became the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. With the establishment of Constantinople, the Western Roman Empire lost its center of gravity. Over the course of the 4th and 5th centuries, many Germanic tribes settled inside Roman territory. They began to adopt Roman customs, language, and even the Catholic faith. But other tribes continued to attack the cities and countryside of the Western Roman Empire. Rome had to pay dearly for its existence. In 395, Theodosius I died, and the empire was split between his sons, Honorius in the west and Arcadius in the east. This formally ended any hope of reunification. But to make matters worse, the emperor of the Western Roman Empire was just a child. He needed a regent, and his mother, Galla Placidia, asked her brother, the Eastern Emperor Arcadius, to send his brother-in-law, the Gothic general Alaric, to assist them. But while Alaric was supposed to aid the Romans, he turned out to be more interested in plundering their territory. In 410, he sacked Rome. It was the first time in 800 years that the city had been sacked. Rome was in shock. But the disasters didn't end there. In 434, a new enemy appeared, the Huns, a Central Asian people who swept through Europe like a storm. Their leader Attila became known as the Scourge of God. He devastated Gaul, threatened Italy, and forced the Western Roman Empire to pay him large sums of money. The Hunnic Empire was short-lived, but its impact on the Romans was devastating. While the empire paid the Huns tribute, the Germanic tribes became bolder. They pressed their attacks against Rome, pillaging the countryside and enslaving the population. Rome was literally being eaten alive by the barbarians. In 455, the Vandals invaded Italy and sacked Rome. This time, there was no salvation. The Western Roman Empire was done. But what actually happened to Romulus Augustulus? After taking off his imperial robes, he was given a noble title and allowed to keep his fortune. He married a woman named Alina, who had once been a slave, and they spent the rest of their lives in relative luxury. Romulus survived another 6 decades, dying in 476. At the time, Odoacer had already been dead for 20 years. Although the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century, its legacy survived 4 centuries. Its laws, its language, its architecture, and its culture lived on in France, England, Spain, and Germany. But the Age of Empires was over. Europe was now in the Dark Ages. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Epic World History. If you did, please subscribe, like, and share this video.